How are you guys doing? It is Monday, November 16th, 2020. I here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I'm going to take you through this weekend's football action as international soccer had a national team break. But in the meantime, it was also week 11 of college football and week 10 of the NFL, and really quickly jumping into that. Starting with Friday's game, seventh ranked Cincinnati was able to beat East Carolina 55-17. Cincinnati's quarterback Desmond Ridder was able to throw for 327 yards and 3 touchdowns to help Cincinnati keep a 7-0 record. And at number 7, I probably think that they're gonna go up in the rankings. Also, starting with Saturday, as we go down the rankings, because not that many teams played. Just before getting into that, first ranked Alabama, their game versus LSU got postponed. Third ranked Ohio State versus unranked Maryland got canceled. Fifth ranked Texas A&M versus Tennessee got postponed. 12th ranked Georgia versus Mizzou got postponed. 15th ranked Coastal Carolina versus Troy got postponed, and 24th ranked Auburn versus unranked Mississippi State got canceled, or that got postponed as well. Taking you through the games that actually played, starting with number 2, Notre Dame was able to beat unranked Boston College 45-31. Ian Book would lead the way for Notre Dame as he threw for nearly 300 yards. He threw for 283 yards, throwing for 3 touchdowns, no picks. He also had 85 yards on the ground and a touchdown, and that would give him a total of about, 368 total yards of offense on the day. And once again, Notre Dame still remains undefeated, and as of right now, the only team that they're looking up on right now is Alabama. At the moment. Continuing on down, 6th ranked Florida was able to beat unranked Arkansas 63-35 as Kyle Trask threw for 6 touchdowns, and in order to help the Florida Gators remain 5-1 in the SEC, and I think with the number 6 ranking, of course, great game for them, great outing for them, just to show how dominant they are against Arkansas. Also, 9th ranked Miami was able to beat Virginia Tech 25-24 as this game went all the way down to the wire. This game would come down to a Mark Pope 36-yard touchdown from De'Aaron King. They failed the 2-point conversion, but they were still able to get the win as Virginia Tech, they proved to be a very tough opponent to beat, but Miami was able to do so, and now they are 7-1 on the season, and they're kind of they're still trying to catch up to Clemson, of course, in the ACC after Clemson's loss last weekend to Notre Dame. Continuing on down the rankings, 10th ranked Indiana was able to shut out Michigan State 24-0. With this win, they're now 4-0 in the Big Ten. Michael Penix Jr. was able to throw for 320 yards and 2 touchdowns to the air. 11th ranked Oregon was able to beat unranked Washington State 43-29 in a very action-packed fourth quarter. Game was close for a good amount of it. I mean, it was 19-14. Washington State was leading at the beginning, but Oregon would, of course, turn it around, scoring 29 points in the second half alone. Also, 13th ranked Wisconsin was able to beat unranked Michigan 49-11. Graham Mertz was able to throw for 2 touchdowns on the day as Wisconsin was able just to dominate them defensively as well. 16th ranked Marshall was able to beat unranked Middle Tennessee 42-14. Marshall's quarterback Grant Wells threw for 5 touchdowns along with 336 yards through the air alone. 19th ranked SMU was upset by Tulsa. Unranked Tulsa was able to beat them 28-24, giving SMU their second loss of the season. Tulsa is now 4-1 on the season, 4-0 in the American Conference. Zach Smith was able to throw for 325 yards and 3 touchdowns to help them get this win. 20th ranked USC was able to beat unranked Arizona 34-30. Keaton Slovis was able to throw for 325 yards and a touchdown to help USC get their second win in the Pac-12. 22nd ranked Liberty was able to beat Western Carolina 58-14. Malik Willis was able to throw for 306 yards and 3 touchdowns. And he also ran for 97 yards and 2 touchdowns to give him a total of 403 total yards and 5 total touchdowns on the day. 23rd ranked Northwestern was able to beat Purdue 27-20 in a game that kind of went down to the wire, but it was still easily out of reach for Northwestern to take their 4th win in the Big Ten. They still have yet to lose. So far, that's what college football is looking like right now. And of course, the rankings will be updated as we jump into the next week. But with that said, jumping into yesterday's matchups for week 10 of the NFL, following the Thursday night matchup between the Colts and the Titans, Starting with the earlier games, the Cleveland Browns were able to host the Houston Texans and beat them 10-7. For the Houston Texans, their elite quarterback Deshaun Watson would complete 20 of his 30 passes for 163 yards and a touchdown. On the ground, he was also able to run for 36 yards to give the team to give Deshaun Watson, a total of 199 yards. Through the air, Randall Cobb was the Texans' leading receiver. He had 41 yards and 3 carries. Duke Johnson, all of his 54 yards would come on the ground as well. On the defensive side of the ball, Zach Cunningham would lead the team in tackles. He had 14 of them, and not much else going on for them, as their goated defensive end, J.J. Watt, would have 5 tackles on the day, one of them being for loss. And jumping on the Cleveland Browns side of things, their quarterback Baker Mayfield would throw for 132 yards. On the ground, Nick Chubb would lead the way with 126 yards on 19 carries and a touchdown. And Kareem Hunt would finish with 104 yards on 19 carries. He also had 28 yards through the air. That would give him a total of 134 total yards of offense for the Cleveland Browns. As this game kind of went down to the very end, at the end of the third quarter, the Cleveland Browns were winning 3-0. The Nick Chubb 9-yard touchdown run would put the Browns up 10-0, and then Farrell Brown's touchdown in the fourth quarter with 5 minutes left would bring Houston to within a field goal, but of course Cleveland was able to hold that lead. And through the air for the Cleveland Browns, Rashard Higgins was their leading receiver. He had 48 yards on 3 receptions. And then also Jarvis Landry would have 29 yards and 3 receptions on the defensive side of the ball. B.J. Goodson would lead the team in tackles. He had 7 of them on the day. Their elite defensive end, Myles Garrett, would have 6 tackles on the day, as he had half of a sack, 2.5 tackles for loss. Sheldon Richardson was also able to log a tackle, as the Cleveland Browns were able to get 2 sacks on the day. And with this win, they're now 6-3 on the season, 4-1 at home, as the Houston Texans now drop to 2-7 with this loss. Jumping to New York, the New York Giants were able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles 27-17, as they were able to score a touchdown every quarter. They were able to score every single quarter to help them get this big win over the Eagles. And now the NFC East is looking more interesting by the week. For the Eagles, their quarterback Carson Wentz would throw for 208 yards, and he also ran for 4 yards on the ground. Miles Sanders had 85 yards on 15 carries. Boston Scott had 63 yards on 3 carries, one of the carries being a touchdown. Through the air, Richard Rodgers was their leading receiver. He had 60 yards on 4 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Alex Singleton led the way with 16 total tackles on the day, one of them being for loss. Derek Barnett and Fletcher Cox were able to log a sack, as the team was able to get 3 total on the day. And looking out to how the New York Giants did, Daniel Jones threw for 244 yards on the day, also ran for 64 yards and a touchdown on the ground. That would in turn give the team Daniel Jones 308 total yards of offense, as he was kind of going off yet again. Great game for Daniel Jones. Also on the ground, Wayne Gallman had 53 yards on 18 carries and 2 touchdowns. And through the air, Darius Slayton was their leading receiver. He had 93 yards on 5 receptions. Big game for him. On the defensive side of the ball, Jabril Peppers would lead the team with 7 total tackles. He had half of a sack, 2.5 tackles for loss. Big game overall, and even their young defensive end Dexter Lawrence out of Clemson would log a sack as well. And the New York Giants, of course, big win for them. They are now 3-7 on the season, as the Eagles now drop to 3-5-1. With this loss, the Philadelphia Eagles still remain on the top of the NFC East. With a 3-5-1 record, as the New York Giants are now half a game, or probably a game and a half, behind the Philadelphia Eagles, because the Eagles still have their one tie against the Bengals from early on in the season. Jumping to Detroit, the Detroit Lions hosted the Washington football team, were able to beat them 30-27. And yet another game that came down to the wire, where the Detroit Lions would kick the game-winning field goal on the last play, as the Redskins, or the Washington football team, did come back from a 24-3 deficit, and the Lions would eventually keep them from. They came all the way back but the Lions would win the game and get them through to the next round. For the Washington football team, Alex Smith, in his first start back after breaking his leg 2 years ago, he threw for 390 total. He threw for 390 yards in the pocket, and on the ground he had 4 yards, giving him 394 total yards of offense. Responsible for no touchdowns, but he still was able to get the Washington football team down the field. On the ground, Antonio Gibson had 45 yards and 13 carries and 2 touchdowns. Through the air, Terry McLaurin would be their leading receiver. He had 95 yards and 7 receptions, and he also had a 127-yard carry. Logan Thomas also had 66 yards on 4 receptions. Just a big day overall for the Washington football team receiving core. And also Terry McLaurin would lose a fumble for the team. On the defensive side of the ball, Cameron Curl and Kendall Fuller both led the team in tackles. They both had 8 of them. Cameron Curl had a sack, the only sack on the day for the Washington football team. For the Detroit Lions, their quarterback Matthew Stafford would complete 24 of his 33 passes for 276 yards and 3 touchdowns. On the ground, DeAndre Swift would run for 81 yards on 16 carries, and their future Hall of Fame running back Adrian Peterson would have 21 yards on the ground on 4 carries. Marvin Jones Jr. would be their leading receiver with 96 yards and 8 receptions and a touchdown. DeAndre Swift, in addition to having 81 yards on the ground, also had 68 yards through the air on 5 receptions and a touchdown. And that would give him a total of 149 yards of offense. Great game for him. Marvin Hall had 61 yards on 2 receptions and a touchdown. And then on the defensive side of the ball, in addition to recovering a fumble, Jamie Collins Sr. would log 13 tackles on the day as he led the team. And then also Jeff Okudah, their elite young corner, rookie corner, would finish with 3 tackles and a tackle for loss. And with this win, the Detroit Lions are now 4-5 as they sit now at 3rd in the NFC North. And with this loss, the Washington football team is now 2-7 as they are now sitting in 3rd in the NFC East, tied with the Dallas Cowboys with a 2-7 record on the season. Jumping to Green Bay, the Packers were able to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars at home 24-20 in a game that was closer than they thought it would be. At the end of the day, after being down by 3, Davante Adams' touchdown from Aaron Rodgers with 9 minutes left would put the Packers above and beyond and help them get their 7th win of the season. Looking at how the Jacksonville Jaguars fared, their quarterback Jake Luton would throw for 169 yards, a touchdown, and an interception on the day. James Robinson, their running back, would finish with 109 yards on 23 carries. He also had 3 reception yards to give him 112 total yards of offense on the day. DJ Chark Jr. would be the leading receiver as he had 56 yards on 4 receptions, while Keelan Cole Sr. had the only receiving touchdown of the day. He had a 47-yarder on 5 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Sidney Jones would finish with 9 tackles on the day. Same with Joe Sherbert. Miles Jack, in addition to logging 8 tackles for the team, also was able to recover a fumble as well. Sidney Jones was able to log an interception for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now, jumping to the Green Bay Packers, their go-to quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, would complete 24 of his 34 passes for 325 yards, throwing for 2 touchdowns and that 1 touchdown that went to Sidney Jones. And then on the ground, Aaron Jones would run for 46 yards on 13 carries. He also had 49 yards on 5 receptions. That would give him a total of 95 total yards of offense on the day. Through the air, Marquez Valdez-Scantling would lead the team in receiving yards. He had 149 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. Davante Adams would also log 66 yards on 8 receptions and a touchdown on the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Christian Kirksey would have 7 total tackles on the day, leading the team. Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith would log a sack each as they logged 2 of the Packers' 3 sacks of the day. Also, Adrian Amos was able to add an interception. And with this win, the Green Bay Packers are now 7-2. Right now, they are sitting atop the NFC North. And with this loss, the Jacksonville Jaguars are now 1-8 as they drop to the worst record in the AFC South with a like I said, they're now sitting at 1-8. Jumping to Charlotte, the Carolina Panthers hosted the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they got their score doubled as the Buccaneers came in and beat them 46-23. For the Carolina Panthers, just on the offensive side of the ball, after leading 14-7 at the end of the first quarter, they would the score would be tied at 17 at halftime, but then the Buccaneers would just kind of destroy them, outscoring them 29-6 in the second half. But getting back to Carolina's offense, their quarterback Teddy Bridgewater would throw for 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick, as he also ran for 16 yards on the ground to give him 152 yards of total offense with 3 touchdowns. Through the air, DJ Moore would be their leading receiver with 96 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Corn Elder would lead the team with 8 total tackles on the day. Trey Boston, in addition to recovering a fumble, would finish with 5 total tackles on the day, as Ife Obata would pick up the only sack on the day for the Panthers. For the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, their goated quarterback Tom Brady would complete 28 of his 39 passes, throwing for 341 yards and 3 touchdowns. He was also able to run for 2 yards and 2 carries and a touchdown, one of them being a quarterback sneak. I think both of them probably being quarterback sneaks. And Tom Brady, that would give him a total of 343 yards and 4 touchdowns on the day, no interceptions. Also on the ground, Ronald Jones II would log 192 yards on the ground on 23 carries on a touchdown. And through the air, he also had added 6 more to give him 198 total yards of offense on the day. Through the air, also, Chris Godwin would be their leading receiver. He had 92 yards on 6 receptions. And their elite wide receiver, Mike Evans, would log 77 yards on 6 receptions and a touchdown. And also, in his second game for the team, their elite wide receiver Antonio Brown would finish with 69 yards on 7 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Levante David would finish with 6 tackles, along with Devin White, both of them leading the team. Shaquille Barrett would finish with 3 tackles, one of them being a sack. Also, Jason Pierre-Paul and Justin Watson would log the other 2 on the team. And Jason Pierre-Paul would also finish with an interception on the day as well. Big game for him. And with this win, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are now 7-3, as they are now sitting behind the New Orleans Saints by half of a game. And at the bottom of the NFC South, now with this loss, the Carolina Panthers are now 3-7 on the season. Jumping to the next game, jumping to Miami, the Miami Dolphins hosted the Los Angeles Chargers. And for the 3rd week in a row, with Tua Tagovailoa as their starting quarterback, the Miami Dolphins have won a football game. As this in this matchup between 2 rookies, starting off with Justin Herbert on the Los Angeles side, he threw for 187 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He also ran for 10 touchdowns and an additional, or 10 yards and an additional touchdown, as he logged 197 total yards of offense. Kalen Ballage would finish with 68 yards on 18 carries for the team. And through the air, he would finish with 34 yards on 5 receptions, and that would give him a total of 102 yards of offense. Keenan Allen would be their leading receiver, as he had 39 yards on 3 receptions, and he also had a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Nasir Adderley would finish with 8 total tackles on the day. And then Nick Vigil, in addition to recovering a fumble, would finish with 1 total tackle on the day. As the Chargers were unable to log a single sack on the day. For the Miami Dolphins, their elite rookie quarterback Tua Tagovailoa would complete 15 of his 25 passes, throwing for 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. On the ground, Salvin Ahmed would finish with 85 yards on 21 carries, as he also logged a touchdown on the ground. He also had 5 yards to the air to give him 90 total yards of offense. Jakeem Grant would be their leading receiver, as he had 43 yards on 4 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, Raekwon Davis and Landon Roberts would both lead the team with 7 tackles each. And then they would only log 2 sacks on the day, one from Nick Needham and the other from Emmanuel Ogbah. And also through the air, Xavier Howard would log the team's only interception. Is now the Miami Dolphins are sitting at 6-3 in the AFC East. Sitting only behind the Buffalo Bills, who are sitting at 7-3. They've played only 1 more game. And with this loss, the Los Angeles Chargers are now sitting at the bottom of the AFC West with a 2-7 record so far on the season. Right now, following the next game, staying within the context of the AFC West, the Las Vegas Raiders hosted the Denver Broncos and were able to beat them 37-12. As this game was not really close for the entirety of the game. I mean, at halftime it was 10-6, but the Raiders were able to pull away. For the Denver Broncos, their quarterback Drew Lock would throw for 257 yards, 1 touchdown, and 4 interceptions. On the ground, their running back Melvin Gordon III would run for 46 yards and 11 carries. Through the air, their leading receiver would be Jerry Jeudy, their rookie, who had 68 yards on 4 receptions. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Alexander Johnson would lead the team in tackles. He had 12 of them total on the day. Not much going for this offense, or not much going for this defense, I'm sorry. And then on the Las Vegas Raiders side of the ball, their quarterback Derek Carr would throw for 154 yards. He had 10 yards on the ground, give him 164 total yards of offense. Also on the ground, Josh Jacobs would log 112 yards and 21 carries and 2 touchdowns. And that would go along with his 24 yards through the air. That would give him 136 total yards of offense and still 2 touchdowns. And also Devontae Booker would log 81 yards on 16 carries and 2 touchdowns of his own. And he would have 2 yards through the air to give him 83 total yards to go along with his 2 touchdowns on the day. Additionally, their tight end, Darren Waller, would finish with 37 yards on 3 receptions as he was the team's leading receiver. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Nick Kwiatkowski would finish with 8 total tackles on the day. That would lead the team. Nevin Lawson would end up logging a recovered fumble as he finished with 1 tackle on the day. Also, Jeff Heath would finish with 2 interceptions on the day as he also logged 1 tackle. Carl Nassib would finish with an interception as he finished with 0 tackles on the day, but that's still a big play. And then in addition to leading the team in tackles, Nick Kwiatkowski would finish with an interception as well. And with this win, the Las Vegas Raiders are now 6-3 on the season, and with this loss, the Broncos are now 3-6. Following the Kansas City Chiefs, who are sitting at number 1 in the division, the Las Vegas Raiders are second at 6-3, and the Denver Broncos are now third at 3-6. Following the Los Angeles Chargers loss, they're still a game better than them so far this season. Jumping to Arizona, or to Phoenix, whatever, the Arizona Cardinals were able to beat the Buffalo Bills at home, beating them 32-30 in a game that kind of went down all the way to the wire. And when I say down to the wire, it came down to a final touchdown from DeAndre Hopkins, a 43-yard pass from Kyler Murray on the final play, a Hail Mary of sorts, as he caught it between 3 players. As I would say, that would easily go down as the best play of the game. Probably one of the best football plays I've seen in my life. That was insane. I don't even know how that happened, but it happened, and that would go down as a 6th win of the season for the Arizona Cardinals. For the Buffalo Bills, their quarterback Josh Allen would throw for 284 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 picks. Also, Isaiah McKenzie, their wide receiver, would throw for 12 yards on his only throw of the game, and he would also log a touchdown. And I think his touchdown went to Josh Allen, as Josh Allen, in addition to throwing for 2 touchdowns, was also to run. He was able to run for 38 yards and also logged 12 through the air. That'll give him a total of 334 total yards of offense to go along with his 3 touchdowns. Through the air, Cole Beasley would be his leading receiver as he had 109 yards on 11 carries and a touchdown. Also, Stephon Diggs had 93 yards on 10 receptions and a touchdown. On the defensive side of the ball, in addition to recovering a fumble, Dane Jackson would finish with 8 tackles. A.J. Klein would lead the team in tackles as he had 11 of them, one of them being a sack. Their elite linebacker, Tremaine Edmonds, would finish with 10 tackles as well on the day. It was a great overall defensive performance that they just couldn't get it done at the very end, and Jordan Poyer was able to log an interception to go along with his 4 tackles on the day. For the Arizona Cardinals, their quarterback Kyler Murray would complete 22 of his 32 passes, throwing for 245 yards, a touchdown, and an interception, as the reigning offensive rookie of the year was also able to run for 61 yards on 11 carries, getting 2 touchdowns on the ground. That would give him a total of 306 total yards of offense to go along with his 3 touchdowns. On the ground as well, Kenyon Drake was leading the team in rushing yards, led the whole game. He had 100 yards on 16 carries. And then through the air, he was only able to log 9 yards, but that still gives him 109 total yards of offense for the Arizona Cardinals. Also through the air, DeAndre Hopkins would be their leading receiver. Their elite receiver he finished with 127 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Budda Baker would lead the team in tackles. He had 9 of them on the day. Their elite cornerback, Patrick Peterson, would defend 2 passes as he also finished with 2 tackles on the day. He also finished with an interception as well, as Dre Kirkpatrick also finished with an interception to go with his 3 tackles on the day. With this win, the Arizona Cardinals are now 6-3 on the season, as they are now tied with the Los Angeles Rams and the Seattle Seahawks for the best record in the NFC West. And with this loss, the Buffalo Bills are now 7-3, but they are now half a game above the Miami Dolphins for the best record in the AFC East. in the first season since Tom Brady left the division. Jumping out to Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to beat the Cincinnati Bengals 36-10 as they remained undefeated, and this game wasn't necessarily close the entire game as their defense locked down Cincinnati the entire game. For Cincinnati, their quarterback, and the number one pick in the 2020 NFL Draft, Joe Burrow was able to complete 21 of his 40 passes, throwing for 213 yards and a touchdown. On the ground, Samaje Perine would finish with 48 yards on 7 carries for the day as he was the team's leading rusher. Through the air, T. Higgins would be their leading receiver. He had 115 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown of the day. And their elite wide receiver, A.J. Green, would have 5 targets. He wouldn't log a single catch on the day. Also, on the defensive side of the ball, Tony Brown would lead the team in tackles. He had 9 of them on the day, 2 of them for loss, as the team was unable to log a single sack on the day. For the Pittsburgh Steelers, their quarterback Ben Roethlisberger would do a complete 27 of his 46 passes for 333 yards and 4 touchdowns. On the ground, James Conner would be their leading rusher. He had 36 yards and 13 carries. And through the air, Deontay Johnson would lead the team in receiving yards. He had 116 yards on 6 receptions and a touchdown. Also, Juju Smith-Schuster would finish with 77 yards on 9 receptions and a touchdown. And also their rookie out of Notre Dame, Chase Claypool, would finish with 56 yards on 4 receptions and 2 receiving touchdowns on the day. On the defensive side of the ball, Terrell Edmonds would lead the team in total tackles, brother of elite linebacker Tremaine Edmonds. Minkah Fitzpatrick would also finish with 6 tackles on the day as he's been big in helping the Steelers maintain their undefeated streak. In addition to recovering a fumble, Steven Nelson was able to finish with 2 total tackles on the day, and Benny Snell Jr. was able to recover a fumble as well. And also for the Steelers, TJ Watt would log 2 total sacks on the day to go along with his 4 tackles. And with this win, the Pittsburgh Steelers remain on top of the NFC North with a 9-0 record. And now with this loss, the Cincinnati Bengals are still sitting at the bottom of the AFC North with a 2-6-1 record so far in the season. Jumping to New Orleans, the New Orleans Saints were able to beat the reigning NFC champs, the San Francisco 49ers, beating them 27-13. As this game went, the Niners took an early lead, but the Saints were able to score 17 points in the second quarter, and they kind of ran away with this lead. For the San Francisco 49ers, their quarterback Nick Mullins would throw for 247 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Through the air, their leading receiver was Brandon Ayuk, who had 75 yards on 7 receptions and a touchdown. And on the defensive side of the ball for San Francisco, Dre Greenlaw would be their leading tackler. He had 11 total on the day. Kerry Hyder Jr. would finish with 5 tackles as he logged a sack. Javon Kinlaw would have 1.5 sacks on the day. And Marcel Harris would recover 2 fumbles after registering 0 tackles on the day. And also looking at how the New Orleans Saints fared, their go-to quarterback Drew Brees would complete 8 of his 13 passes for 76 yards and a touchdown. Jameis Winston would get subbed in eventually as he completed 6 of his 10 passes for 63 yards. Through the air, Alvin Kamara was their leading receiver. In addition to logging 15 yards on 8 carries and 2 touchdowns on the ground, he finished with 83 yards through the air on 7 receptions and a touchdown, which would give him a total of 98 total yards and 3 touchdowns for the New Orleans Saints. Michael Thomas, their elite receiver, would finish with 27 yards on 2 receptions. And before getting to the defensive side, I think it's worth noting that go-to quarterback Drew Brees was sidelined after a hit from Kentavious Street, and that was why Jameis Winston got subbed in. But looking at the defense of the New Orleans Saints, Demario Davis would lead the team in tackles. He had 12 total on the day as he logged 1 sack, and he had 3 total tackles for loss. Marquez Callaway would end up recovering 2 fumbles as well, as he also finished with 0 tackles on the day. Also, through the air, Malcolm Jenkins and Patrick Robinson were able to log interceptions for the team. Just a good overall defensive performance from the New Orleans Saints, and with this win, they are now 7-2. They are now sitting atop the NFC South, half a game ahead of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And with this loss, the San Francisco 49ers are now 4-6, sitting at the bottom of the NFC West, the only team that isn't sitting at 6-3 so far. And then speaking of the NFC West, the Los Angeles Rams were able to beat the Seattle Seahawks at home 23-16 as this game came down not really to the wire, as the Rams were able to kind of inflict their will and dominate the Seattle offense so far. For the Seattle Seahawks, their elite quarterback Russell Wilson would complete 22 of his 37 passes, throwing for 248 yards and two interceptions, on the day. He would also lead the team in rushing. He had 60 yards on the day to give him 308 total yards of offense. Alex Collins on the ground would also finish with 43 yards on 11 carries and a touchdown. Through the air, Tyler Lockett would be their leading receiver. He had 66 yards on 5 receptions on the day. And on the defensive side of the ball, DJ Reed Jr., in addition to leading the team with 10 total tackles, would finish with 1 recovered fumble. And Bobby Wagner and Jamal Adams would finish with 7 total tackles each. Jamal Adams was also able to get 2 sacks on the day, 3 of them being and 3 tackles for loss. And just going to the Los Angeles Rams, their quarterback Jared Goff would complete 27 of his 37 passes, throwing for 302 yards. And on the ground, Cam Akers would be their leading rusher. He had 38 yards on 10 carries. Malcolm Brown would finish with 2 touchdowns on the ground as he had 33 yards on 6 carries. And Darrell Henderson had a touchdown on the ground as well as he had 28 yards on 7 carries. Through the air, Josh Reynolds would be their leading receiver. He had 94 yards on 8 receptions. And on the defensive side of the ball, Leonard Floyd, in addition to logging 5 tackles, 3 sacks, and a recovered fumble, he would just have an amazing day. Micah Kiser would finish leading the team with 12 total tackles on the day, and John Johnson III finished with 8 total tackles on the day, all solo tackles. Terrell Lewis would finish with 2 sacks on the day, as those were his only 2 tackles on the day, and their elite corner, Jalen Ramsey, would finish with 2 tackles as well. Aaron Donald, their goated defensive tackle, finished with no tackles. He finished with 2 quarterback hits, though, on the day, and with this win, the Los Angeles Rams are now 6-3, and also Darius Williams is also able to log 2 interceptions before I get to the record. And with this win, with this Rams win, both teams are now 6-3 in the NFC West. As both of those teams, along with the Arizona Cardinals, are going to try to compete over the next few weeks as to who's going to finish this season on top. And last but not least, jumping to the last game of the night, the New England Patriots were able to beat the Baltimore Ravens 23-17 in a very, very close game where there was no scoring in the fourth quarter, but the New England Patriots were able to take advantage in the third quarter. And after the Ravens were able to bring it to within 6, the New England Patriots defense was able to keep the Baltimore Ravens from scoring, which is a very tough feat to do considering they have the reigning MVP on their offense. Speaking of the reigning MVP, Lamar Jackson, their elite quarterback, would end up completing 24 of his 34 passes, throwing for 249 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception, as he also was able to finish with 55 yards on the ground, giving him 304 total yards of offense. Through the air, Willie Snead IV was able to finish with 64 yards on 5 receptions and 2 touchdowns. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Patrick Queen was able to finish with 9 total tackles on the day as he finished with a tackle for loss. Matthew Judon would finish with 4 tackles on the day, one of them being a sack. He had 2 tackles for loss. That was the only sack of the day for the Baltimore Ravens. For the New England Patriots, their elite quarterback Cam Newton would complete 13 of his 17 passes, throwing for 118 yards and a touchdown. He also ran for 21 yards. And he was able to finish with he had 21 yards and a touchdown. That would give him 139 total yards of offense with 2 touchdowns. Damian Harris was also able to finish with 121 yards on 22 carries. Jacoby Myers was able to he was 1 for 1 in his passes, throwing for 24 yards and a touchdown, as his touchdown went to Rex Burkhead. Rex Burkhead, in addition to getting 131 yards on 6 carries, was able to finish with 35 yards to the air on 4 receptions, giving him 2 total touchdowns on the day to go along with his 66 total yards of offense. And in addition to his touchdown pass, Jacoby Myers was able to lead the New England Patriots with 59 yards to the air on 5 receptions. On the defensive side of the ball, Kyle Duggar would end up leading the team with 12 total tackles on the day. John Simon would finish with 5 tackles and a sack. And Josh Uche would finish with the only other sack on the day, and J.C. Jackson was able to lock the only interception in the game. With this win, the New England Patriots are now 4-5, which is good enough for being 3rd in the AFC East behind the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. And with this loss, the Baltimore Ravens are now 6-3, tied with the Cleveland Browns, 3 full games behind the first place undefeated Pittsburgh Steelers. And so far, that's what That's what transpired this weekend in terms of football. And jumping into tomorrow's Monday night football matchup, this matchup will be between the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears as we see this NFC rivalry take shape on ESPN at 8:15. The Vikings are currently 3-5, and the Bears are currently 5-4. We're going to see this matchup between Kirk Cousins and Nick Foles, and of course Dalvin Cook being one of the league's leading rushers. And Derrick Henry ran for 103 yards. We could see Dalvin Cook possibly extend his rushing yards lead so far. And with that said, it is Monday, November 16th, 2020 out here in this quarantine. I'm James Sims. I want to thank you for listening to all 34 minutes of this piece. I hope all is well, and I'll get back to you tomorrow following today's Monday Night Football games. Peace out.